Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the All the Things podcast with Lenya and Lindsey Maestas. Today, we had the amazing opportunity to speak with Grammy-nominated musician Jeremy Camp and his beautiful wife, musician and author Adie Camp. These two are a serious power couple, not only in their successes, but also in their spiritual lives. From their living room, the Camps sit with us and share their story of fighting together through Jeremy's anxiety and the power of a wife's prayers. Jeremy discusses the competitive nature in the Christian music industry and how others have waited for him to fail. Lionsgate has produced a movie based on his life called I Still Believe, which releases in 2020 and is based on the loss of his wife to cancer. Adie Camp talks about the emotional process of going through that movie with him, and they share how we as a society can come alongside those who suffer with grief or anxiety in the most loving way. Take a sneak peek into their lives today in this conversation. You will leave feeling challenged and encouraged. Welcome to All the Things, the unscripted podcast where we talk to intriguing people from a variety of cultures, backgrounds, and career paths and deconstruct who they are and why they think the way that they do. We dig deep and ask unexpected questions to learn about all the things, from faith and current events to relationships and mental health. We want to satisfy your craving for knowledge, true connection, and real conversation. This is Lenya and Lindsey Maestas.
It's an exciting day today. I don't know about you, Lindsey.
Yes, I'm very excited.
But I think it's going to be a blast. We have two of my favorite people. We got to travel through Israel with them and their kids and their family. And it's like they became fast friends and people we just love so much. It's Jeremy and Adie Camp. And thank you for being with us.
Oh, we're so excited.
This is honestly, when you guys asked for us to do this, we were like, absolutely, let's figure it out because we love you all so much.
And we appreciate that so much in your schedules. And I wanted to say this is such a little random tidbit, but I was driving to my house and I'm listening to this song on Christian radio. And I listen to Christian radio regularly, but it's very rare that I hear a song where I'm like, dang, that is so good. And it was called Dead Man Walking. And I'm like, my radio, and I was like, who sings this song? My husband would love this. And it was Jeremy Camp. I told him, I get to talk to him next week. But it was really, just very powerful. The song itself was really impactful for me. So I just thought that was fun.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. You know, Jeremy, sometimes you can have this formulaic Christian sound. You know what I mean? And when someone comes out of that and is an outlier and does a song that actually, for those of us who are like used to the jukebox, it's just playing the things we like to hear. When someone develops a sound that's outside of that and genuine and authentic and real, it's so enjoyable. How do you juggle that, breaking whatever the role is and being yourself and not trying to write a hit, but trying to write something authentic? I mean, what is that process like?
Yeah, honestly, it's been even my whole kind of career in a sense. It's definitely a battle. I mean, you have all the voices telling you got to do this and you got to do that. And you really have to say, God, what do you want me to do? What is the direction you want me to go? And I really feel like with this new album in particular too, I was at the point too in my life where I was like, God, you've allowed me to do so many things. I'm so thankful. I don't want to just, do what is normal. I want to make sure I'm doing something fresh, that you are giving me something relevant for today. And, kind of going back with this movie idea, when the movie started coming up to be, and I'll share that a little bit more later, I realized that this movie was going to hit a younger generation. And with that, God started giving me these songs that I wasn't trying to be younger. I wasn't trying to be anything. He just started giving me songs that I really feel like relate to this kind of new generation, something fresh, something new. And I didn't think about anything but, I went in there and I'd say, okay, God, just do something fresh here today. And, we serve a God who gives us fresh things. His well doesn't end. It's deep and deep and deep and goes deeper. And even his well of creativity never ends. I mean, look at his creation, everything is constant. And so for me, going into the writing sessions and creative sessions, I was saying, God, I really want to do something different here. I want to do something where I'm not in the box, that I'm out of the box, that not to be out of the box, but because it's something that's fresh that you've, placed in my heart. And so we did. We went in there, no preconceived ideas of anything, not trying to write a hit song. And one of the first songs I wrote was Dead Man Walking. You're talking about that. And I think the neat thing about that was it definitely was a move in a different direction, but we weren't trying to. It just felt like that's where it needed to go. And honestly, I feel like God's hand was on this whole record with fresh new ideas and an anointing that I think was for this kind of next generation. And so very exciting. And honestly, it's just, I think when you dig into the well of God's creativity, it won't run dry. And that's how you got to stay fresh.
I want to applaud you for that. Thank you so much, because I think it's easy just to stick in the winning, successful formula. And then I think almost as an artist, you shrivel and die. So anyway.
But then you see that success come in a whole new form because someone's willing to branch out and be themselves and allow God's giftings that they've given them specifically to be used rather than, like you said, mixing in with a formula. And you had mentioned your movie, Jeremy. And so we would love to dive into that. You're in the process of creating a new movie, I Still Believe. Can you tell us when that will be launching?
Yeah. Originally, it was slated to be March 20th, 2020, which was amazing. But we just found out they moved it forward actually to March 13th, 2020.
Cool.
So just a week, but they moved it forward because they're trying to avoid different movies that are coming out at certain times, because they really feel like they're going to put so much into this movie. They want this to be the movie of the weekend. They don't want to have anybody else competing. And so they're putting a lot into this. And honestly, it's been a journey that I think me and Adrian have kind of been a little blown away. And so it's been very surreal because we're seeing how here's a secular company, mainstream company in Hollywood called Lionsgate that decides to take on this picture, which is a story of my life. And they have repeatedly spoken to me and said, we are so behind this film. We're so excited about this. They spoke to their investors and said, we have this big film that we're excited about coming out. Not just a faith-based film. They're just saying we have a big film that we're excited about. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing about this whole, I don't know. I think faith-based films are amazing. And so I think that sometimes though you can kind of be limited when you say a faith-based film. And this is a faith-based film, but it is out the box again, because I feel like that we're working with people that think outside the box. The message is still there. The gospel's still there, but really it's done in a way where I feel like it's once again creative and fresh. And with Lionsgate being behind it and the actors that are involved and the actresses involved, it's been pretty incredible to watch. And I think that we're kind of just still trying to figure out what's happening. Really is what it is.
So exciting. Good for you guys.
So a lot of people, well, maybe some people, some of our listeners may not know what your story is. So they're excited about Lionsgate and this I Still Believe, but they may not have the background. And now I'm realizing why you're not coming with us to Israel, by the way. Those are the dates.
That is why.
Yeah.
They were, we were so fun doing that and we had to reschedule, but God will work it all out. Anyway, maybe telling a little bit about your story and what the movie I Still Believe entails.
Yeah. So it was about, my goodness, it's been almost 19 years ago. I went through a very difficult time, one of the worst times of my life. My wife went to be with the Lord. She had cancer and we were married for, just 3.5 months. And, I knew going into our marriage that she had cancer. I knew we were going to have to go through chemotherapy, go through all the treatments. And, the whole movie is just the story of how we met, me coming from Indiana to go to California to go to school, meeting Melissa was her name. And just that whole, really, it's a love story is what it is. But it's a love story that focuses on testing of your faith and someone who has, in the midst of a hard time and trials, putting their hope and their faith in Jesus. And that's the whole story. And of course, it ends up with her going to be with Jesus. And then at the very end is a fun little surprise about my wife now that you'll see that I'm very excited about. But it ends not with a hopeless feeling. It ends going, okay, God, you were there in the midst of the whole thing. You're the reason why, I could say, I still believe. Really the whole end of it, you're saying, well, Jesus was the only reason why I was able to get through this. That's it. And Jesus was the only reason why Melissa was able to walk through this graciously and with full faith. Not that it wasn't difficult, not that you don't see. You'll see it's very real. That's one thing in the film that I think that you'll see. It's very raw. You see my grief, you see my angst, you see the pain, you see my questions, to be honest. But it doesn't end there. There is a resolve, and it's going, okay, Lord, this doesn't make sense. This hurts, but I still believe in your faithfulness. I still believe in your truth, and I still believe in your word. Even when I cannot see, I still believe.
That's powerful. One thing I love about you, Jeremy, is you are so authentic. And so when you say you moved to California for school, I think you also ended up going to the Calvary School of Ministry out there in Murrieta. And as I recall, you were living with a senior citizen to make ends meet and driving her to appointments. I mean, it's not like you're just like big Jeremy Camp traveling around. Is that what you were doing at that phase of life?
Yeah, actually, after Bible college, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I went back to Indiana and I just prayed and fasted and said, God, what do you want me to do now with my life? And he literally said, go back to California, which at that point, I knew people and I had led worship here and there, but it wasn't a thing where I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. Said, go to California. So I went out there, went to the school again because there was a youth pastors conference, and I knew I could actually stay at the school with my friend who was at the conference. And so I was there just kind of hanging out. I had one bag. I flew out with a one-way ticket, and somebody picked me up from the airport and took me to the college. And there I was walking around one day like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? I have nowhere to live, kind of homeless.
We'll work for food.
Literally, that's what I felt like. And so all of a sudden, a friend that was at the conference said, hey, I heard that you're looking for a place to stay, that you're back in town. My grandmother needs someone to live with her and just take care of her, go drive her to appointments, get groceries for her. I'm like, that sounds great. I'm in. And
I think most people would have been like, is that a joke? That's so cool.
No.
So telling of your heart that you were like, sure, let's do it.
But that was kind of definitely my personality anyway. I just was like, yeah, I mean, I'll try it out. Why not? And so I remember my friend who was the youth pastor took me to her house and said, wait, you're doing what? I said, yeah, I've never met this lady before and I'm just going to stay with her. And they're like, okay. So he drops me off and he's like, well, see ya. I'm like, all right, see ya. Knock on the door and she opens up the door and I'm like, hey, my name's Jeremy, the one that's going to be living with you. And she goes, oh, you have such beautiful eyes. And I'm like, well, thank you. And so she said, come on in. So came in, we talked for about 2 hours about her husband who was in the military and he had passed. And she showed me my room. And that's kind of where things started for me out in California.
I think that's really good for the audience of especially younger people to realize you don't just arrive someday and that you do the little things. He who's faithful in little will be faithful in much.
Absolutely.
And so, never despise the days of small beginnings. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you look back and those are some of the best days, honestly. And so I'm so proud of you that, Adie, we like to talk on Sheology and All the Things podcast that we think there's an art to being female that is kind of being lost in society. And honestly, if I was going to pick a female out there, you would be like under the definition of that, the art of being female, because you bring something to this relationship. I mean, you were a musician in your own right. I don't know, were you headlining and Jeremy was opening for you, or were you touring together? I mean, how did that work when you guys met?
So it was Jeremy's very first tour. And I had been playing with my band for a couple years, traveling around like crazy, really. And Jeremy hadn't even released his album yet. So we were touring together and he was in the opening band section. And then I was next in line. So he was opening for me.
That's what I like to say. Come on.
And it was so fun because I remember having conversations with him because his first album came out while we were on tour. And I was like, so how much did it do first week? I'm like, that's really good. And I'm encouraging him, Little did I know where we would end up.
I love
it. But it was just amazing. God really just had something in store for us. And we had no idea. We were not interested in each other at all at first. Mm-hmm. But we connected. I was very intrigued and pretty blown away by Jeremy's testimony and Melissa's as well. And I just was really hungry for authenticity, and I was desperate for people who were really genuinely living out their faith, because I felt like I had seen so much double standard and so much hypocrisy that I just was so hungry for something real. And when I met Jeremy and heard his testimony and just, I was asking him so many questions about it, I just thought, you can't make up faith when you're staring death in the face, and for both Jeremy and Melissa, you can't all of a sudden just somehow find Christianese things to say. That's sort of when the rubber meets the road. That's in true trials is where the actual character of who you are comes out. And I just was blown away. And so we became actually very good friends very quickly. And at somewhere along the line, started wondering where the other one was. And I'm like, why do I even care where Jeremy is right now?
You guys are a power couple, not only successfully, but in the spiritually, just your heart. And the first thing I ever heard about you, Jeremy, was that when you found out that your wife had passed away, you worshiped in the hospital room. Is that true?
Yeah, I remember I was on the ground, literally in a fetal position, because I knew it was about time, and I just was so broken, so tired, because we had been in the hospital for so long, and I just had been up for days and couldn't get sleep, and I was just worried constantly. And I remember laying there on the ground, and I heard from her sister, she said she's with Jesus now. And we always had worship music playing in the background, and God spoke to me and just said, stand up and worship me. And, I had a couple of moments where I just sat there, and I was like, God, I remember having conversations with him. God, I can't. The last thing I want to do right now is stand up and worship you. And, finally I'm kind of like Peter, 3 times, finally, I'm stubborn. And I said, okay. And I stood up, and I remember my dad kind of helped me up because I was trying to stand up, and I felt like that I needed to stand up and worship. And I started raising up my hands. And I remember I felt the presence of God so thick in that room that I know that if I wouldn't have done that, I would not have experienced his presence. I would have not experienced that. Even though I knew he was near, the presence and the peace and that thick, really, literally this thick presence that is there was there. And it really was a comfort to me, because I just realized he's near in the hard times and the times when you're like, God, where are you? I remember because of the obedience, even though I didn't feel like it, he's still worthy to be praised. And I stood up and started worshiping. And it was a healing thing for me, for sure. It wasn't like all of a sudden, oh, I'm fine. There's God. I'm great. It wasn't that. But it was a moment of going, okay, God, thank you that you're here, that you're near.
Well, I think he's in the room now, even reliving that with you, because I'm crying. So if you could see me, I'm all welled up with tears and just so pleased, because there's so many of us out there that do grieve and do go through times. And sometimes we shake our fist and how dare you, or, and you said you dealt with honest, real questions.
Absolutely.
But I think that worship is a stronghold breaker, right?
Absolutely.
I think when we worship, the strongholds come down for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's just a beautiful aspect. And I think sometimes we do cry through the pain. I mean, it's kind of a Job moment, right? Though he slay me, yet I will trust him.
That's right.
Is what you were saying. And I think that's what God was telling you, step up to this faith. And I would just hope that the audience would realize that sometimes faith is a choice.
Yeah.
And it's not your feelings, right? Your feelings did not want to stand up.
No.
Your feelings did not want to do that, but your faith did.
Yeah.
And if you let faith drive that train and put the feelings in the caboose, you're going to get more steam down the track of faith. And so that's just such a perfect picture for a Christian to say, okay, everything's wrong, everything hurts. Feelings say no, but faith says yes. And when we do that yes faith decision, it changes everything.
And the testimony that now precedes you, I mean, that's the first thing I ever heard. And that it impacted my faith, and just thinking, as a brand new believer, how does somebody respond in that way? That doesn't make sense to me. And now, I've been a believer for a while, I understand it and I see it, but I still admire it. And the testimony that must have been to the nurses and to the doctors. Adie, how has this been as you have walked through this loss? Because it takes a strong woman to stand by a man who has grieved and who has lost a woman that he loved. What has that emotional process been like for you?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, Jeremy and I weren't interested in each other initially at first in a romantic way. And so instantly, as we became friends, I remember a couple times actually on tour, it was the anniversary of their wedding. And I remember just thinking about how to be a good friend for him, how to be a support system for him. And I think that really set the tone for our relationship. And it wasn't so much about feeling insecure because there's another woman. Because in reality, there isn't. She's in heaven, and I'm fully confident that God has given Jeremy and I to each other to walk this road together. And the truth is the Jeremy that I'm marrying or married is different from the one that Melissa married. Once you've gone through grief, it just forever changes you. You're shaped differently. You see things differently. You struggle with different things, perhaps fears that you never imagined. And so I think we've just been committed to walking out this life together. And then the most important thing is just knowing that this isn't about me. It's not about Jeremy. It's not about Melissa, but it really is about Jesus. And it's about heaven. It's about that our eternity is in heaven. And that's the anchor for our souls, that hope that one day we will be fully comforted and fully healed with no more tears, no more sorrow, no more pain. And until then, I think that just kind of taking things moment by moment sometimes and just asking myself, like, what does Jeremy need right now, and just trying to be that for him, I guess.
And that's why it makes you one of my heroes for a woman, because love is patient and is kind and is not boastful and does not seek its own and is not puffed up. And in all those ways, not envious, not jealous. So really, you were manifesting true love, that you're not letting a shadow, so to speak, stay over that. And I think that's just another really good lesson for us, to really define true love. And I don't know if the world even has a picture of that, but thank you, Adie, for showing us that.
Right before Jeremy and I were married, I got to go and have coffee with Tammy Corson, which for those who don't know, she is a second wife. Yeah. And I got to sit down and just sort of pick her brain a little bit and just ask her, there's sort of things, it's like when you've gone through something, the people who've gone through those same things, there's like a common bond, I guess. But she that day challenged me, and she said to me, she goes, if Jeremy only shares about Melissa from stage and never ever shares about you, would you be okay with that? And really, honestly, it wasn't even something I had to think about, because instantly I knew that his testimony has reached so many different people and has touched so many different people that I just knew that, I would be okay to be put to the side. And there was another quote once that I heard, I think it was Isabel Kuhn or another missionary, that said, I would gladly lay myself aside as long as I can see God move. And I think that was sort of my thing with the Lord, of just going, Lord, if I'm to be laid aside in a sense, that we get to be a part of seeing the Lord touch people's lives and use this testimony to encourage others and to bring hope, I'm all in, I
want to say something real quick, because I want to let you guys know that this is not, her saying that is real. Because I think sometimes people are like, well, do you ever struggle? Is this really what? Well, yeah, of course we all struggle, and we'll share some of that, of course, later. But that's my wife. Like what she just said is, I've lived with her, for how many years now? We've been married for 16 years. And that's who she is. And so when she says that, it's not her saying, this is what I want to be and what I'm going to tell everybody that I am. It's actually who she is. And so I just wanted to affirm that, just so you guys know that it's not her just saying the right words. That actually is who she is.
And I'm going to piggyback. I've observed you guys. And if you guys don't know, she has a wonderful book club, and I follow her on Instagram, called the Camp Girl Books.
Yeah.
And so you guys just have to follow that. She is such a great mentor to her two daughters. Are they both teenagers? Are they getting close to teenage?
They're both teenagers.
Yeah,
15 and 13.
But if you're looking for something to do with your kids, with your daughters, mom-daughter time, and to be able to share the bond of books and laying those into your family's lives. I mean, so you're a multi-dimensional woman, girl.
She is.
Husband and wife agree about what the Jesus decision is in their relationship. It's complete clarity.
Yes.
And so that's what you guys have decided, that eternity is what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that what's the best way is our family to serve eternity and serve the Lord.
Amen. Well, and, honestly too, it's like, we're just like everybody else in a marriage. I mean, we have our ups and downs, we have our struggles, we have our fights, we're normal. And so, you hear all these things, it's like, it doesn't come without having to work through our own flesh, our own grossness. I mean, with this whole movie coming about, we felt like the Lord laid in our heart to write a marriage book. And which, we sit there and we were like, wait a second, but we're not really qualified to write a marriage book. And then the Lord just basically was like, yeah, you're not qualified, but I'm wanting you to do it. I made you qualified, because of me. And so we sat through and we just were very honest, wrote this marriage book and shared, yeah, this is our desire. This is what we've learned, but this is kind of the road that it took us to walk on to get there. It wasn't an easy road. It wasn't like, yeah, everything's constantly great. We always focus on Jesus. We always put Jesus first and never ourselves. It wasn't that. It's just showing that we realize what you just said. It's not husband or wife or male or female. It's Jesus and eternity. And once we started doing that, that's when things started clicking. And we still have arguments, but it's you get through them quicker or you communicate better. It's like you learn those things, but not without the rubs. And I'm glad for the rubs because it's made us kind of show the grossness in our hearts so that we deal with our hearts individually, not, hey, Lord, deal with her heart so it can be easier. Or she's not like, Lord, deal with his heart so it can be easier on me. It's like, God, deal with my heart. And, we'll go from there. And I think that's what has made it work. And, 16 years into marriage and 3 kids, that's what it is. It's Jesus, period.
That's good. You've mentioned pain. Adie mentioned fear. You're talking about being real and having real issues. And Jeremy, when we were in Israel, we both found out one of the real issues we deal with, I do, you do, is anxiety.
Yes.
And this is just an anxiety-ridden era, for one thing. I mean, if you really studied the percentage of Americans that suffer from anxiety, I'm sure it's through the roof. And so I think just one day there was something in your mannerisms on your face, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And you're like, "No, I had the weirdest night." And I think that Adie's just been there for you in that too. I see God adding her to you for a stabilization and encouragement, just like Skip is for me.
Yeah.
I mean, Skip never suffers anxiety. It's me. So I don't know if you'd like to just open that topic to the audience about anxiety and how you handle it.
Absolutely. It's the same thing. Adrian doesn't battle with anxiety. And so I think the Lord, once again, he's perfect in placing people together who are supposed to be together, because I think if we both struggle with anxiety, it would be difficult to figure out how to deal with it, but, I think one of the things in my family in particular, I think there's a bondage of fear, the stronghold of fear. And, when you go through any type of trauma anyway, it's going to add to that. I think for years, I would always think, okay, Lord, when I started having kids, I was like, Lord, you probably won't take my wife again, but you might take my kids. Like it was just, things that, that you don't think about normally. But when you go through something like that, it's a reality. You're like, well, maybe, okay, I can probably be okay with my wife, but maybe one of my kids, something going to happen to them. And so I really walked around a lot with worry and fear. And with the pressures of what I do, and once again, the travels and people strike the iron while it's hot. You hear that a lot in this industry. And anything that you're doing when things are going well, people are saying strike the iron while it's hot, like go, go, go. And what can happen with that is the pressures can mount up to the point where you can't handle those pressures. We're as people, we're not supposed to. It says be anxious for nothing and everything prayer and supplication. But a lot of times we don't do that. We're not in prayer and supplication because we're so caught up and busy striking the iron, And so I found myself just battling with fear and with worry. And with that comes control issues. Not like you're trying to control, a controlling husband or wife. It's not that. It's you're trying to control your situation. It's an illusion of control. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so
Preach.
And so it's something that a false idea of what we have, and we don't. God is completely in control. And so I came to a head about actually on our trip. And so I was in Uganda about 2 years ago, and been battling with, some issues with someone that we knew that was very close to us that was battling with addiction that we found out. And with that comes a person that can be deceptive, manipulative, someone that we trusted and loved very much and looked up to. And so when that started happening, I started becoming upset and resentful. I think bitterness started creeping up in my heart. And, when that starts happening, the enemy tries to attack on every angle. And so, of course, the fear and the worry and the control were the things that he really, really piggybacked on because I was very weak. because I was caught up in being upset and resentful. And so the side of me that was the spiritual man was very much bogged down. And so I go to Uganda, with my kids. The whole time I'm there, I feel really weird. I'm feeling, God's using it. There's 35,000 people that showed up to this event we did, and 1,000 people responded to the gospel. Really powerful moment that shows that God can do anything, even when you're at the height of anxiety, the height of trying to control, the height of all that. God can still use you. Now, you're going to come to a point where it's going to come to a head, and it did. So we go to Israel. I'm still feeling a little bit weird. My kids are sick. And so I'm thinking the whole time, this is the thing that the enemy tries to do. He tries to put in your mind things that are just, it's too, I don't know.
Worst case scenario.
Thank you. That's the best. The worst case scenario, like it's irrational. That's another word that I want to use. Irrational thoughts start coming because your spiritual man is weakened. And so I'm like, are my kids going to die of malaria? Do they have malaria from being in Uganda? I mean, literally, these are thoughts that I'm having, just out of control thoughts. So that night before I saw you, when I said I had a really weird night, I had a panic attack. I was laying in bed, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe, and I just started freaking out. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and I went into this crazy panic attack. Well, I've had mild panic attacks before, or anxieties, but this was like, okay, got through it, but still was feeling weird. So we flew home, and like, okay, I'm good. I felt stoked to be home because I'd been gone for a month, so I'm like, okay, it's nice to be home. Maybe I'll start getting better. Well, my wife was gone for the day, and I was exercising, working out. Then all of a sudden, I started getting overwhelmed with panic again. And I found myself in a place where all of a sudden I just out of control. And I called my wife and I said, I can't breathe. I don't know what's happening. Please come home. And she came home, and I got to the place where I started feeling like I was losing my mind. And I can literally say that I felt like I was losing my mind. I was having a literal nervous breakdown. And I remember Adrian warring with me. Like you said, Lenya, about strong woman and someone who is a warrior, that is my wife. And she would sit there and fight and pray, and we'd worship. I'd put on worship and try to worship, and to the point where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I couldn't leave the house. I was bedridden. I couldn't eat because I would try to eat, and I feel like I couldn't breathe eating. So I was like, I can't even eat. I'd panic doing that. And finally, I remember I'm laying on Adrian's lap and just weeping for forever. I'm just weeping. And I remember telling her, I'm so sorry that I'm a weak man. I remember saying that, like, I'm so sorry I'm so weak. And she's like, no. And she's basically like, do not speak that, because that's not true. The enemy is just attacking you, and just kind of speaking life, praying for me. And finally, as I'm sitting there, I cried out from the uttermost parts of my soul. And I said, God, please help me. What is happening? Why am I in this place? And literally God showed me, I wrote these down. He said, you're bitter towards this person that had, in a sense, hurt you. And you're trying to control your situation. You're not trusting me at all. And Jeremy, do you not understand how much I love you? Do you not understand that perfect love, that my love is perfect, it casts out fear? And I wrote down all these things. I was in fear and trying to control family, like nothing would happen to them. Like it was like I could control that if something would happen to them, but I thought I could. My finances, my future. It's like literally the 3 F's, family, finance, future. God literally was like, you are not trusting me with any of those things. And you're resentful, you're bitter. And I repented. And I wept and cried out and asked the Lord to forgive me. And the thing started lifting. And after a couple weeks of pretty much being bedridden, and I couldn't go out, I had social anxiety. I couldn't even go out and see people. And I'm a very sociable person. So you can imagine people are like, hey, Jeremy. And I'm like, get away from me.
Jeremy is so much fun to hang out with. It's true. You're like,
so I was going, I can't even talk to anybody. And I had to leave, buildings, and I couldn't go to events because I just would have social anxiety. But God started lifting that. And I realized it was due to those things that I was trying to control, and I wasn't trusting the Lord. And of course, listen, there is chemical imbalances. There's things that happen. There's times when God says, take this and this is okay. And because there's just things that you need, that's okay. I, in this situation, was like, I had to go to the innermost part of my soul and go, what is it that I'm holding on to? What is it that's causing this? Because I knew it was something, because I was just overwhelmed with so much fear. And, honestly, it wasn't a thing where all of a sudden I was like, yeah, this is great, I'm fine. It was a constant, we call it, like you said, Lenya, like a barking dog. That's like, what if you on the airplane and you have a panic attack?
Yeah.
You're on stage and you have a panic attack on stage. And so I had to constantly fight those attacks. It's still it's one of those things where I don't let my guard down. I realize that it's a weakness, that I feel like I have broken a lot of the bondage of fear. My wife's shaking her head right now because she's walked this with me. But I feel like I have broken a lot of the bondage of fear. But I still have to just continue to put my trust and my hope in him, and not think that I'm strong enough lest I fall. It's like that whole scripture. It says, you think you're strong, take heed lest you fall. It's like, don't sit there and go, oh, I got this, I'm fine. Because the enemy's going to be like, oh, okay. He'll chip away and chip away and chip away. And
I want to lay my testimony alongside of yours, just because it's so tandem. And I think the enemy is a stinking liar. And
Amen.
The same tactics over and over again. So as you're writing this down, I'm going, it was satanic. It was a stronghold. He's a liar. He robs and he kills and destroys. I'm taking all these notes because it really is what he does. He sticks a thought in your mind, and then that just takes root. And then we ruminate. I don't know about you, Jeremy. My worst times were at night. It's like, turn the light off, ding, 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 round one. You know what I mean? It was like, because you're left alone with your thoughts, and it's like the battle is on. And so the enemy really will try and find a stronghold, whatever it is. I didn't lose my wife. That won't happen. It might be a kid. When Skip and I got married, my thought was Skip would die, and I didn't even know your testimony. And every time he'd be at the door, it'd be like, I'll never see him again. Or, he'll never sing that song again. And the enemy just like took a foothold. And then, like you say, when you start having a panic attack, it does make you think you're going crazy. So then I went, oh my gosh, Skip married a crazy woman.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be in church and they're going to come put me in a straitjacket and drag me out of the church, and it will ruin his ministry. It's so crazy. And it's just like all of that stuff just builds up. And for me anymore, because I think I learned the same tools that you do, literally, I mean, I know we always say this now, it's like, not today, Satan, but sometimes I have to literally shout, no. Put the brakes on it. That is not the voice of God. The enemy's voice is so condemning, so fearful that I'm like, that's not God. And so now I challenge my thoughts. When thoughts come in my head, I don't just think this is, Lenya. I go, who is that thought? Is that the enemy? Is that my conscience? Is that God? And you can tell the difference. And so I have to be really vigilant that I take my thoughts captive. You know what I mean? I have to take them captive, and then, every good thing, think on those things, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. I mean, it's work, but it sets you free.
Well, and it's so interesting because we laugh when we talk. I suffered with postpartum anxiety really severely. And you laugh when you talk about it because in the past, it seems so illogical.
Right.
But in the moment, it's so all encompassing and it's suffocating.
Yes.
And we talked about statistics, and it's 40 million people in 2019 suffer with anxiety just in the United States alone. And so it is a very real spiritual and physical battle. And just like you had mentioned, hormonal imbalances or whatever it might be, which was my situation.
Right.
But it was so interesting because mine was very physical. I didn't even know what was going on in my mind. I didn't know what was there. It was just, I would ask my husband, can you please just come and squeeze me as tightly as you possibly can? Because I feel like that's the only thing that will release this pressure and this pain. But as you mentioned, as I started really digging into what was causing this, okay, Lord, just you and me. And I would write down, this is something that really helped me. I would write down the lies that I was believing. And next time I would write truth that refutes that. And seeing it tangibly right in front of my face was really powerful. And one verse that you referenced, Jeremy, is Psalm 56:3. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you.
Yes.
And I think that's the foundation of it all, is I cannot control my future. I cannot control what happens to my children. I feel like worry is something that people don't ever talk about when you're having kids, the amount of worry that you will experience.
Yeah.
but remembering that Jesus loves them more than we could ever love them.
Yeah.
And so God wants us to trust us. For our listeners who struggle, because if 40 million people are struggling, we're going to guess a huge percentage of the people even listening are struggling, but that he wants us to trust his sovereign, all wise, all knowing, all providing self, and remember that he cares for us. But that sometimes, yes, there are moments when we need to go to talk to a doctor because we're suffering as well.
Absolutely.
I want to hear Adie in a second on this, but what I want to say to the audience, because this is one of my favorite kind of topics now, there is a thought-feeling connection. Feelings don't happen. Feelings come from situations and what we tell ourselves about those situations.
That's right.
And your feelings come after that. And if you start following your feelings, you'll be all tumbled, twisted up.
Yeah.
What you have to do is start a new thought process. That's renewing your mind, that your feelings can follow that new thought process. That's part of taking your thoughts captive. And so many women will say, I don't know, I just feel this way. You really have to stop and make the thought feeling connection. And so you eventually did. You said, I thought it was physiological till I wrote down my thoughts.
And then you begin to see, and you're taking your thoughts captive and obedient to Christ, which changes the game. It really does change.
And so if it's a feeling thought connection, then really in the realm of spiritual warfare, the battle's for your mind.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You know, it's you said it so brilliantly, just saying that there's times when you just say, no, Satan. And I remember many times, and one time being in the shower and just feeling it. And I'm like, no. And because you have to understand, if you look at it as the scripture, it says that he's like a roaring lion seeking to whom he may devour. He's constantly trying to devour us. And he's constantly trying to steal, kill, and destroy. It's just, that's what he wants to do. So, but we have the weapons of the warfare that we need to battle it. And I think we have to understand that. We have that spirit within us. Romans 8:11, the same spirit that rose Jesus Christ from the grave lives within us. So it's like we have that spirit, the weapons that we need to battle that. And so when you say no, it's because you have that power. And I think we need to stand in that authority that we have.
I love it. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. Adie, you have helped Jeremy do this. The day he said, I'm sorry you married a weak man, you rebuked the wrong thought.
Yes.
I don't want people to think you start rebuking thoughts, okay? I'm not going on some weird doctrine. Somebody loved him enough to say, no, that's a lie. And I know the truth. So talk about how you as an observer can help equip him with that thought feeling struggle,
especially when you haven't dealt with it. What is that like?
Yeah, so I don't struggle with anxiety. I've never had a panic attack. And so a lot of those things, I don't know what that feels like. But I've tried to be a listener because like you say, there are millions and millions of people who struggle with this. There are also millions who don't and who don't understand it. But it's real, and I know that it's real. And so the moment that I saw it, I felt, and I say it, I really felt it was the enemy almost coming to take territory in our home and in our lives. And I've seen close family members and such that have also struggled with anxiety and depression. And it was almost like I felt like he was coming knocking on our door to kind of see, well, okay, we're going to take this into the next generation. And to be honest with you, the mama bear came out of me that I was just like, not on my watch. This is not happening. And so in this, really, when Jeremy was struggling, that's what was just, in a sense, awakening in me, was just the soldier going, this is not happening. And I know scripture. And so I know that we have the authority in who Jesus says we are and in him and because of his blood. And so I would literally march through the house and just be like, no, in Jesus' name, this is not, and I'm declaring peace over our family, the peace that surpasses understanding. I mean, I literally was just marching around the house and I'm going, I don't care if everybody thinks I'm nuts. This is not happening on my watch. And so I think that not only the people who are struggling with anxiety have to learn to take that position, but people that are also supporting them. You know, I really feel like Jeremy and I battled that together. Yeah. And when he was on his knees repenting, which let me just say, it was for days. I mean, we really felt, I do believe that was where the breaking came, but we would go back again the next day and go back again the next day. And while he was repenting, I also was going, God, maybe I don't struggle with anxiety, but I've also got junk in my heart. And so forgive me for participating in anything that maybe if it is also bitterness and resentment in my heart. And so I feel like we were honestly just battling it together alongside each other. But during this whole time as well, the Lord gave me a picture of, we're football watchers in our home, and Jeremy has graciously explained to me all the rules in the NFL. But it was so sweet because the Holy Spirit just said to me, tell him he just needs to get the next down. It's just this play-by-play thing.
Good.
So you're not standing in the beginning of the game and looking at the end and going, how the heck am I going to make a touchdown?
Good.
There's no way I can get myself across the field. It was literally just that next thing. And so that's what I would tell him, babe. It's just catch the ball. It's just the next pass. The Holy Spirit is the quarterback and he's throwing you, here it is. We just need to make this next play. Because it was a lot of kind of moment by moment stuff, you know what I mean? And so sometimes I think we try to bite off way more than we can chew and just let the Holy Spirit take us through just that moment by moment thing and let him be the one to get you down the field. Let him be the one to give you that victory, you know, because you're not going to do it in your own strength. And I certainly can't do this in my own strength too. I really, really believe that the way that we're able to battle alongside each other is because we've spent time in the Word and spent time with the Holy Spirit, you know? And so in those moments, he's the one that's going, I want a warrior woman right now to come and warfare alongside her husband, and he's going to raise that up in each of us.
Yeah.
I knew I loved you guys.
Yeah.
Now I love you even more.
Yeah.
I want to say a couple things to the audience for those who are either suffering anxiety or those along the side battling with that person. Is the only way out is through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Don't curl up. Don't back down. The only way out is through. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
You've got to go through. And you can't escape it. The more energy you use trying to escape, the worse it comes. Walk through it.
Absolutely.
And so that's my exhortation, number one. And number two, in Revelation, it talks about one of the names of Satan is the accuser of the brethren.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so the lies we're talking about, Jeremy, they're accusations.
That's exactly right.
They're like, you know, you were fooled once, you could be fooled again. This is going to happen to you, or you know what I mean? Whatever it is,
Yep.
they're accusations. And sometimes we try and fight them. Like, no, it's not true. You know, you're fighting the accusation. You know what I have? I agree with the devil. And that sounds horrible.
No,
But what
I
I'll
know
say
what you
is,
mean.
I go, you're right. I am a creep. I'm a horrible person.
Yeah.
And I am just, you're right. But it says they overcame the accuser of the brethren through their testimony and the blood of the Lamb.
Amen.
So when I say, I agree with you, you're right. My testimony is, I was once lost and now I'm found. I'm blind, now I see. I was a bartender and a discotheque and a drinker, but I'm not anymore. I'm filled with the Spirit. And so whenever he comes and tries to accuse me, I'm like, and that's the whole point. Jesus Christ saved me and I'm a new creature in Christ.
Amen.
And I don't use any energy trying to dodge it. I'm just like, yeah, it's true.
That's so good.
It's so true. It's so good.
I was recently reading A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, and he was pouring his heart out about the loss of his wife. And as we've talked about mental health and grief and loss, I thought it was really interesting. And he said, and this is a quote from him, "An odd byproduct of my loss is that I'm aware of being an embarrassment to everyone I meet. At work, at the club, in the street, I see people as they approach me, trying to make up their minds whether they'll say something about it or not." And then he basically says that people will edge away from him or they'll come up with red faces and then back away as quickly as they can. And I feel like the church sometimes, or people in general, don't know how to handle these hard conversations, and they shy away from it or they pretend it never happened. And I've had friends who've suffered losses and they say, you know, I was really surprised that people didn't even come up to ask me about it because they were too embarrassed to ask me about it. So in both of your opinions, how can we as a society, as people who are called to love our neighbor, how can we handle this better in a way that is comfortable for people who are struggling and when we know that they are suffering?
You know, there's a couple things that I realized in the midst of what I wanted, what I didn't want, and you learn that when you go through that. One thing I can say is that don't try to relate to somebody. And what I mean by that is I had people come up to me, and this is no joke, and I understand the heart. You're trying to make a connection so you can talk and you're trying to say something, but they said, hey, you know, we we feel you. We went through something recently too, and we can relate. We lost our dog. And I remember just being so upset because I couldn't believe they would associate their pain of loss of a dog with the pain of my loss of a wife, a human being.
Right.
And I was so disturbed by that. And so I think people, we have to give those who are grieving, give people grace. I know it's hard to give people grace when you're in the grieving aspect.
Yeah.
You're trying to make a connection. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. And so you have to understand that. But those who are trying to comfort somebody, understand that you're not going to say the right thing. All you can do is just be there for somebody. The things I love the most when people just would sit there, put their arm around me and just say, I love you. You know what I mean? You're doing okay. Just know I love you. I'm thinking about you. Or can I just pray for you? Nothing, not even, but they would acknowledge it. They would, they wouldn't act like it wasn't there, but they wouldn't try to say the right thing. They wouldn't try to tell me it's going to be okay. You're going to see her one day in heaven. It's, God's going to use this in a mighty way. It's like, I didn't want to hear that because I knew those things. Just put your arm around me. Tell me you love me, give me a hug. Like if you see somebody walking down the street that went through something, them, say, hey, how are you? Give me kind of a hug. Just, I love you, praying for you. That's it. And honestly, it's very simple. And I think that means more to people than you know. And I think too, realize that everyone grieves differently too. So, you may even have went through a loss and you try to relate to somebody because you went to a loss. Don't do that either because everyone grieves differently. They relate to pain differently. It doesn't feel the same. And there's different, ups and downs and processes through that.
Right.
So don't be like if even somebody lost a wife, don't be like, I understand. You can be there and like, love you. If you need anything, I'm here, but don't try to say, I understand your pain. Cause that's another thing that's not going to go over well.
What do you think of the question, how can I best support you in this time?
I love that. Yeah. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Hey, what I would tell people is say, I have people that have been through hardships and losses say, hey, praying for you. If you need anything at all, I'm here, whatever I can do. And that's it, period. Yeah. And that's all you have to do. It's not overcomplicated, and I think one thing as a person too, that if a griever is talking to you and they're like, well, I don't want to question God. I don't want to ask why. And I always say you should. And this is what I mean by that. So hear me out. So I share this a lot, and it's because I think that we don't talk about this as Christians, that Jesus on the cross, when he was suffering and he was there, he said, why, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Good.
So there was a moment of question that even Jesus had. Was he in sin? No, absolutely not, because he never sinned. So was that a sin that he said, God, why have you forsaken me? No, not at all. There was a moment of what's happening here. The father couldn't look upon because of the sin that was placed upon his son. Mm-hmm. And so he had that moment of like, whoa, but this is what Jesus did. He said immediately after that, he goes, but into thy hands I commit my spirit. But I surrender. Like, I don't understand this, why this, what's happening, but I surrender. And I think that's the key to telling people it's okay to ask the question because we don't understand. David would say why many times. I mean, it's constantly, but he would end up saying, but thy loving kindness endures forever. Your mercies are new every morning. I mean, there was a resolve. And I think that my advice to people or my encouragement is don't get stuck. People just tend to get stuck in that place of why. You got to move forward. Like you said, walk through it, through the valley. Don't avoid it. Don't, act like it's not there. Say, okay, God, I have questions. Why? And walk through it and understand that you're not going to maybe get all the answers that you want until you get to heaven. And that's okay. But it's okay to voice. He already knows that you're feeling that way anyway, so you're not hiding anything from him. But it's not a sin. But don't get stuck there. Walk through it and let him comfort you and walk you through day by day, step by step.
Yeah. In tandem to that, it's fine to ask questions. Don't let it turn into questioning God.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
God questions is great. If it turns into questioning God, that's where you get stuck. Mm-hmm. And so ask him all the questions and, he may answer them.
Right.
And, he may not, but I bet you'll get a lot more than if you don't ask the question.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
So ask all the questions, but just be careful of, wallowing in something that becomes questioning God.
That's right.
You touched on your music, Jeremy, in regards to anxiety. What does that pressure of measuring up look like? Like to have as a celebrity musician in your position, how do you manage that? And how does that feel, say, when you release a new song? And are you watching the numbers? Are you looking at Twitter to see how people respond? And does that affect your anxiety?
Yeah, I will say one of the things I had to learn to do, honestly, was when we, released something, I had to stop. I would start looking and seeing how it was doing and seeing if people were responding. Because at that point, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your affirmation from man. And
Right.
if you try to get your affirmation from man, you'll never be satisfied. Because even if you're at the top, at some point you're going to fall down. You're not going to always remain at the top. So if you're looking for that affirmation, then you'll never be satisfied. And I think that for me, the pressure, I had, honestly, it's so interesting. I've had throughout my career, he'll be like, well, maybe this is it for Jeremy. Maybe he's kind of going down. And then all of a sudden you put out some better song and it's like, oh, this is amazing. He's back. And you're like, it's a constant, everyone's looking for you. Sometimes, especially in the industry, are looking for you to fail because it makes them feel better about themselves. And I think that that's a trap because everyone is so seeking for man's approval or seeking for that success that the body of Christ is not coming together, cheering each other on. They're trying to squelch each other because they want that glory for themselves. And I'm telling you, it is a very evil thing because God is saying, I'm not about that. If you're not about my kingdom and you're trying to get the glory, I want not a part of that at all. And so you're going to fall and you're going to fall hard. And so it is a pressure. And I had to stop. Like the other day I told my manager, I said, hey, I haven't looked at iTunes or anything for like a month because I just don't even want to go there. I don't even want to put myself in that position. And I think that, of course, as people were designed, or even if whatever personality you have or whatever it is, you're designed to want to do well with what you've been given. You want to be a good steward. You want to do well with what you've been given. So it's not like a bad thing that you want it to do well. You want to reach people, but it's being devastated when it doesn't happen. That's the issue. It's like there's nothing wrong with going, I want this to do well. I want to reach people. But it's the devastation. Instead of saying, okay, God, I worked really hard at what you've given me. Like your guys' podcast right now. We're going to work really hard. We're going to do it the best we can, get the right people, and we're going to pour our hearts out. And honestly, at that point, you have to let it go. You have to let it be because God's going to be the one that's going to increase or not. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't love you if it doesn't go the way you think. I think that's another attack the enemy is going to try to put at you is that, well, God's not happy with you. He doesn't love you. And that's why it's not doing well. You can't, that's another lie. But you have to understand that once you work hard and do what you can with what God's given you and are a good steward, then you have to let it be what it is and go, you give me the measure of success that you want, God.
Yeah. And with other musicians, are you surrounded with other musicians? How do you fight that industry standard, the competitiveness? Are you able to set a standard, so to speak, inside of that industry?
Yeah. One of the big things that I've realized when I've done a lot on tour, when I see people, I constantly try to find something that they've done that I'm like, hey, I'm proud of you. This is awesome. I love your new song, or man, that was amazing. Walk off stage, like, man, it was so powerful, man. I'm so proud of you. I've really tried to affirm the people that I'm around, and that helps so much. It drops down walls, drops down the barriers of people trying to compete. And I've built some really, really sweet relationships with people that don't feel competitive with me at all because they're like, I will constantly affirm them. And I'm not saying I'll ever battle with being competitive because I'm a competitive person by nature. I played sports, like that's just my nature. But it's not a thing where I'm competing with people. Does that make sense? I'm more.
Yeah, you're not willing to put them down in order to make yourself feel better. You rejoice with them and celebrate them along the way, and know that God has given specific gifts to specific people.
Amen.
Generosity slays jealousy.
That's exactly right. And I realized that with anybody and anything that you're doing, if you will just always, even if your pride doesn't want to do it, doesn't matter. You go and you encourage that person because if they're about God's kingdom, don't you want them to do well? So and even the ones that may not be, you might think they might be about God's kingdom, about their own kingdom. It doesn't matter. Encourage them because maybe that God will change their heart and go, you know what? I've been trying to do this on my own and trying to, be my own person here without, glorifying God and glorifying myself. I don't want that because I see what it looks like when you're not doing that and how much peace you have and how much joy you have and rejoicing with other people.
Yeah, it's not the other person's motives, because Paul talked in Philippians. Some people preach Christ for Christ's sake, and some do it to try and add to my pain.
Right.
But what do I care? Either way, Christ is preached.
Amen.
Yeah.
It's not my job to know, their motives. My job is to be generous, and God can sort it out. So
That's right.
it's always better to take the high road. Okay,
Good.
so when we end our broadcast, often we give the opportunity for things you hate and things you love. And I don't want you to go all Christian, like, the only thing I hate is sin. Because then I'm going to call you out. No. But, like me, I hate goat cheese.
I love that.
I hate oysters.
Oh,
I hate when Jeremy leaves the tea bag in the cup and puts it in the sink.
Oh, I didn't know that. You didn't tell me that. Okay, that's good to know.
Under the marriage book.
Trying to think what else.
Goodness, I'm trying to think what I don't like.
I hate the pressures of social media.
Yes. Okay. Can I just say that I hate the pressures of social media. That's actually one of the things that she knows that I can't handle, because I'm like, I feel like I have to post something exactly right. Or even if I'm trying to be real, it's like, well, I got to post something real. It's like, oh, it's all of that. It's just, I don't like it. It drives me nuts.
Okay. What are 3 things that you guys love?
I love my family. I really do. I love my husband and my kids.
I love adventures with my family. Like I'm the type of person where like, let's go try this thing out, or let's go try this, restaurant, or let's go try this, hiking canyon or whatever. I love adventures with my family. When we go on traveling trips, even if it seems chaotic, I'm like, just look at it as an adventure. It's fun. You know what I mean? And I told everybody that, hey, this is an adventure. I like a lot, but it's an adventure.
You do Enneagrams. Are you a 7?
Listen, I'm an 8 with a high 7 wing.
Yeah.
So I'm actually an 8. Isn't that funny? Wait, you're an 8?
I'm an 8.
Are you serious?
I'm not. No joke. I am so driven. I would love to rule the world. Just kidding.
Yeah, well, I know. That's me.
Adie, have you taken it?
Yes, I'm a 2 with a 1 wing.
I was going to say a 2 or a 6.
Yeah, I'm a 2 with a strong perfectionist edge.
Lenya, that's funny though, because I thought I was a 7, because that's kind of a lot of my personality comes out as a 7 when I'm with people, my social personality. But then I took the test and I was like, oh man. And I refused to be an 8. I was like, I'm not an 8. and took the test and they're like, no, you're definitely an 8. But I do have a high 7 wing, which was where a lot of my kind of social things come out. But when it comes to sometimes being driven, and that 8 comes out. And then my coming across sometimes harsher than what, like when I'm working with people, like my guys or whatever, my wife's like, I don't think you realize how you come across sometimes. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. I don't do that when I'm with like friends or I'm in a social fun, things.
Totally. I get busted out.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the 7.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. It was such a joy to have you. And we are really excited for I Still Believe, and to see all of that, and just to have your testimony spread even further in your faith. And we're so excited just to celebrate you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
It's been amazing.
We love you so much.
For behind the scenes videos and photos, as well as info about our upcoming guests, follow along with us on Instagram at allthethings.podcast. You can keep up with Lenya at Lenya Heitzig and Lindsey at lindsey.maestas. If you'd like to listen to past episodes or learn more about us, visit the allthethingspodcast.com.